Have you ever walked away from a conversation and felt strangely unsettled, as if something was taken from you without a word? Maybe it wasn't the insult you heard, but the praise that felt a little too polished. Maybe it wasn't the kindness shown, but the silence that lingered after. We live in a world where not all smiles are honest, and not every hand extended is meant to lift you up. Some people observe, not to understand you, but to map out your weaknesses. They wait for the moment when your guard is down, when your emotions speak louder than your reason. The Stoics knew this game long before us. They understood that evil rarely announces itself with fire and thunder. More often, it comes dressed in charm, in patience, in the illusion of closeness. And the only shield that cannot be bent, the only strength that cannot be borrowed, is the calm mind. So this is not about learning tricks or matching cunning with more cunning. It is about seeing clearly, standing firmly, and remembering that you do not have to lose yourself to someone else's performance. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, we'll walk through the quiet power of a calm mind and how it allows you to outsmart even the darkest intentions. 1. Guard your inner fears. Have you ever felt how quickly another person can sense your unease, even when you tried so hard to hide it? A glance that lingers too long, a slight tremble in your voice, the pause that slips in when you recall a failure. Our fears often reveal themselves more loudly than our words. And in a world where not every smile is sincere, those fears become more than private emotions. They become openings for those who wish to use them against you. The Stoics knew this truth. Epictetus once wrote, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about things." And it is precisely those opinions, your secret doubts, your imagined catastrophes, your quiet shame, that manipulators seek out and exploit. I once knew a man, calm and steady in his work, who admitted to a colleague that he dreaded confrontation. It seemed harmless, even human, but from that day on, just before every meeting, the colleague would chuckle, "Don't worry, no one will push you too hard today." To others it sounded like humor. To him, it was a reminder of the weakness he had revealed. In another story, a woman confided in a friend about mistakes she made years ago. What she thought was vulnerability was later twisted into chains as that friend brought up her failures every time she tried to move forward. These moments were not accidents. They were strategies, subtle, deliberate, and meant to keep another person small. The Stoic response is not to shut down or harden into coldness, but to learn discernment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Guarding your fears means choosing carefully what you share and with whom. It is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of wisdom, the quiet decision to ask yourself, does speaking this out loud help me grow, or does it arm another with my weaknesses? In a time where oversharing has become the norm, where every emotion is broadcast for others to dissect, restraint itself becomes revolutionary. Seneca once said, "Nothing is so bitter that a calm mind cannot find comfort in it." That calm is not accidental, it is cultivated, in private journaling where honesty cannot be twisted, on reflective walks where silence becomes a teacher, in the habit of asking inwardly, "Am I speaking to be sincere, or am I speaking just to be seen?" The more you know yourself, the less you need others to confirm you. And the less you need, the less they can control. To guard your fears is to declare that your inner life is not for sale. When the world praises reaction, you learn restraint. When others shout, you practice listening. What looks like quietness from the outside is in fact power within, because the one who has already faced their own fears cannot be manipulated by the whispers of another. That is when you become untouchable. And from here, we move to the next shield of the Stoic mind: the strength to hold your judgment, even when others try to write your story for you. 2. Hold your judgment firm. Have you ever felt the urge to defend yourself before you even fully understood the accusation? It is as if the ground beneath your feet suddenly shifts, and you scramble to steady yourself while someone else writes the story for you. This is how manipulation works, not through force, but through quiet distortions that make you doubt your own footing. In moments like this, the Stoics would remind us that our greatest power lies not in how loudly we argue, but in how calmly we hold our judgment. Epictetus once said, "They didn't know the rest of my faults, not in shame, but in serenity." His words reveal a truth. When you stand secure in your own mind, no one can wield it against you. I remember the story of Joel, a friend who worked at a rising tech startup. Joel was bright, steady, and devoted to his craft. Yet one day, a co-worker, Marcus, began circling him like a shadow. In private conversations, Marcus praised Joel's talent, but planted subtle seeds of doubt about the team. "They don't see your value," he whispered, "but I do." Flattered and secretly afraid of being overlooked, Joel leaned into Marcus's words. Slowly, suspicion grew. He grew distant, then confrontational, until one meeting laid the truth bare. Marcus had been undermining Joel all along, turning his doubts into a ladder for his own ambition. Joel realized too late that the battle was never about skill, but about surrendering his judgment. This is why the Stoics train us to pause. Between what is said and what you choose to believe lies the space where freedom exists. Marcus Aurelius urged himself daily to guard this inner citadel, and Seneca called restraint a strength greater than force. The manipulator doesn't need your fists or your fury, they only need your blind agreement. And so they dress lies in empathy, wear sincerity like a mask, and count on your hunger for connection to do the rest. But the Stoic asks, where does this story come from? Who benefits if I accept it? Does it serve truth or only someone's hidden agenda? Think of life as a vast marketplace of opinions. Some vendors shout, others whisper, yet the wise do not buy at every stall. They walk slowly, weigh carefully, and choose only what nourishes the soul. That is how we must treat our beliefs. Doubt, in this light, is not weakness, but a safeguard. It keeps us from paying too high a price for someone else's illusion. And so the practice is simple, though not easy. Do not rush to defend yourself when attacked. First ask if the attack even deserves your breath. Do not let urgency drive your decisions. Pause, test the ground beneath your feet before you step. Recognize that calmness is not apathy, but sovereignty, the quiet rule of someone who knows their mind belongs to them alone. For the moment you surrender that judgment, you invite others to build your reality. Imagine how different your life would look if every choice truly came from within, no longer pulled by flattery, no longer provoked by whispers, no longer fooled by appearances. That is the Stoic way. It is not about distrusting everyone, but about trusting yourself first. And when you master this, you cannot be bent or broken by manipulation. You become sovereign in the only kingdom that truly matters, your mind. And with that foundation set, let us move to the next principle, where we uncover how clarity and calmness not only protect, but also empower you to face the world's hidden snares. 3. Beware of blind joy. Have you ever noticed how easily we prepare ourselves for pain, yet how rarely we prepare for joy? When heartbreak comes, when betrayal strikes, when failure knocks us down, we brace ourselves, expecting life to test us. But what if the greater danger does not come in the shadows, but in the light? What if your most vulnerable moment is not when you are broken, but when you are soaring? It sounds strange, doesn't it? Because joy feels safe, yet the Stoics knew better. Seneca warned that no emotion, not even joy, should be allowed to overthrow reason. He wasn't condemning happiness, but he understood that when joy blinds us, it makes us careless. And it is often in those radiant moments that manipulators step closer, not with threats, but with warm smiles. Think of Elias, who landed his dream job. He was elated, unstoppable, and in that glow came a message from an old acquaintance. "I've got an opportunity for you." Riding high on success, Elias said yes without hesitation. Months later, he discovered it had all been a scam. Or consider Olivia, newly engaged, her heart overflowing. Her fiancé's brother came to her with a simple request for a small loan, framed as just between us. Wanting to keep peace and preserve the joy, she agreed. That small favor became repeated demands, and when she finally refused, she was labeled cold. In both cases, joy itself was the bait. Manipulators don't wait for your lowest point. They strike when your defenses are down, when you feel untouchable, when you stop questioning because everything feels right. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be tolerant with others, strict with yourself." Yet in moments of joy, we reverse this. We loosen our judgment, excuse too much, and let emotion lead. Modern Stoicism doesn't teach us to fear happiness, but to meet it with awareness. When something good happens, do not rush into every door it opens. Pause, reflect. Ask, is this choice aligned with my values, or is it just a way of clinging to the rush I feel? I myself keep a practice. When joy arrives, I write down the choices it tempts me with. Then I wait 48 hours. If the excitement still carries wisdom after 2 days, I proceed. If not, I let it go. That pause becomes a shield. Epictetus reminded us that freedom is the only worthy goal in life. But freedom is not found in chasing every high or preserving every celebration. It is found in acting with principle, not impulse. The Stoic does not suppress joy, but steers it. They understand that joy, unmanaged, can be as blinding as grief. The question is not whether you should celebrate, but whether you can celebrate without surrendering your clarity. So the next time life lifts you high, ask yourself, am I acting from my center or just reacting to the thrill? Imagine your future self standing beside you. Would they nod in approval or shake their head with regret? Because manipulators don't need your sadness, they need your celebration. They thrive on the moment you stop testing, stop questioning, and start trusting the feeling more than the facts. But you are not powerless. To respond rather than react, to lead your emotions instead of being led by them, that is calmness. And calmness is not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. Joy is a gift, and you should embrace it fully. But let purpose, not impulse, decide what follows. When your emotions serve you instead of controlling you, nothing can shake your peace. So the next time joy finds you, don't let it carry you away. Carry it with wisdom. Celebrate, but stay awake. Because when you remain grounded in clarity, you protect both your happiness and your freedom. And from here, we move to another hidden trap, one that often disguises itself as care, yet quietly bends your will, something you will want to see before it blindsides you. 4. Set boundaries, not debts. Have you ever felt the weight of a favor turning into a chain? At first it feels warm. Someone helps you, opens a door, gives you encouragement when you need it most. Gratitude flows naturally. But over time, that kindness shifts. It's no longer a gift, but a debt, collected through subtle reminders. After all I've done for you, this is the least you could do. In that moment, you realize the truth. You're no longer in a relationship built on trust, but in a transaction wrapped in guilt. The Stoics warned us of this long ago. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That line is a shield. It means you are not ungrateful for setting boundaries. You are ethical. Integrity, not obligation, is what preserves freedom. True gratitude does not require servitude, and true generosity asks for nothing in return. I think of Natalie, a young analyst mentored by Paul, a senior she once admired deeply. He championed her in meetings, offered guidance, and gave her confidence. But slowly, the asks began. First, covering up his small mistakes. Then, taking blame for decisions she hadn't made. And when she hesitated, he reminded her, "I gave you your start." What looked like mentorship had become a leash. Natalie's story shows us how easily gratitude can be twisted into control. Epictetus gave us a way to see through this trap. Never say of anything, "I have lost it, but I have returned it." Even the help we receive, even the bonds we cherish, are not possessions. They are borrowed, never owned. Setting limits is not betrayal. It is reclaiming your agency. The Stoic asks, "Am I doing this because it aligns with my values, or because I fear seeming ungrateful?" That single question separates dignity from manipulation. Seneca reminded us, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Saying no, calmly, firmly, without apology, is one of those adversities, and it proves not your loyalty to others, but your loyalty to yourself. You don't need to craft excuses or long defenses. A simple, "this doesn't feel right to me," is enough. Modern life is full of blurred lines. Families use old sacrifices to silence truth. Colleagues hold past favors over your head like weapons. Friends who once gave generously remind you of it when they want to steer your choices. But a Stoic mind is not for sale. Your peace is not a bargaining chip. William Irvine, in A Guide to the Good Life, wrote that we must practice inner convictions that free us from guilt and pressure. One of those convictions is this: it is okay to walk away from someone who once helped you if staying requires you to betray your conscience. Healthy relationships breathe freely. They are not contracts, but connections. If your yes becomes a no to yourself, then it is time to pause. Marcus Aurelius taught that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That heavy guilt you feel is not your master, it is your cue. Reflect, decide, then act with courage. You owe no lifelong loyalty to manipulation. You owe one thing: to remain honest, whole, and free. So set limits, not lifelines. Honor kindness received, but never let it define your choices. Keep your mind calm, your principles firm, and your compass pointed toward what is right, not what is owed. That is how you outsmart those who trade in guilt. And before we move on, take a moment, subscribe if this message resonates, and drop a simple word in the comments: boundaries. Together, we keep learning to walk with clarity. Now, Let us turn to the next principle, where another subtle trap awaits, one that thrives on silence and demands to be seen. 5. Guard your truths. Have you ever spoken too quickly, only to regret the words that slipped out? In a world that applauds transparency and rewards instant vulnerability, we are constantly nudged to bare our souls, even to those who haven't earned the right to hear them. We mistake curiosity for compassion, and in doing so, we forget that not every listener deserves our truth. Some ask not to understand, but to inventory. They lean in, nodding, probing, not out of care, but calculation. And while you speak, they gather pieces of you, like a collector assembling weapons for later use. The Stoics saw the danger here. Epictetus reminded us, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This was not only a lesson in humility, but a warning about strategy. The manipulator often reveals little of themselves. They stay vague, controlled, while skillfully pulling fragments from you. What feels like connection is, in reality, a quiet surrender of your defenses. I remember Michael, a hard-working employee, who felt an immediate bond with Darren, a new colleague. Within days, Michael had shared his insecurities, his doubts about his role, even personal conflicts at home. Darren, by contrast, remained elusive, speaking little of himself while always urging Michael to share more. Weeks later, Michael's private words came back to him, disguised as feedback from his manager. His fears had been repackaged. His honesty turned into someone else's leverage. What cost him wasn't betrayal alone, it was the unguarded trust he had mistaken for friendship. Vulnerability, the Stoics remind us, is only strength when paired with discernment. Shared too freely, it loses its nobility and becomes dangerous. Think of your truths as house keys. Would you hand your home key to someone simply because they seemed polite? If not, why give strangers or shallow acquaintances the keys to your inner life? Modern Stoicism does not ask us to be fortresses, cold and impenetrable. It asks us to be wise gatekeepers. Real connection doesn't demand instant access. It respects the slow pace of trust. Seneca advised, "Consider when you are speaking, to whom you are speaking. Your words, your story, your pain, these are not for public consumption. They are treasures, not trinkets. And treasures, once handed carelessly to the wrong hands, can be twisted into weapons. If someone presses eagerly for your story but offers nothing of their own, if their urgency outweighs their empathy, pause. Ask yourself, have they proven consistency? Have they shown compassion? Have they earned the right to hold your truth? If the answer is no, your silence is not coldness, it is sacred. A chosen restraint that protects not just your peace, but the clarity of your journey. Some will call you guarded, even distant, but those judgments reveal more about their expectations than about your integrity. The Stoic does not speak less because they feel less. They speak less because they understand the cost of being misunderstood. Silence, in this sense, is not absence, but presence. It is the space where you decide what remains yours and what you are ready to share. To protect what you reveal is not to fear connection, but to respect it. The ones worthy of your story will not demand it. They will earn it through patience, consistency, and compassion. And when you offer your truth to such people, it will be received not as currency, but as a gift. That is the quiet strength of discernment. Guard it well, and as we move forward, we'll see how this same clarity can be applied not just to words, but to actions, how choosing what you give and when becomes the truest measure of freedom. 6. Silence is your shield. When was the last time someone pushed your buttons just to see how you'd react? Maybe it was an accusation disguised as a joke, or a question laced with guilt, meant to corner you into defending yourself. In moments like that, most of us rush to respond, because silence feels like defeat. But the Stoics understood something different. Silence is not weakness, not retreat, not surrender. It is a shield, and when you wield it with intention, it becomes one of the strongest strategies to outsmart those who thrive on chaos. I remember a time working alongside a colleague who always twisted words, stirring conflict out of thin air. One afternoon in a team meeting, he tossed out a sly remark, an accusation wrapped in humor, clearly baiting me to react. Normally I would have defended myself instantly, but that day I stayed quiet. I didn't flinch, didn't explain. I simply met his eyes with calm. The energy in the room shifted. He had expected anger or protest, but silence disarmed him completely. That's when I realized silence is not the absence of response, but the presence of control. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be like the rock against which the waves continually break. Waves roar, crash, and scatter, but the rock remains unmoved." That is the essence of silence. Manipulators depend on your predictability, the way you defend, justify, reveal your patterns and fears. The more you speak, the easier you are to map. But silence confuses them. They cannot read what they cannot see, and in that uncertainty, their power slips away. This doesn't mean silence for its own sake. It means using silence as space to think, to observe, to spot manipulation before it traps you. When you don't rush to defend yourself, you give their games nowhere to land. It's like pulling the stage away from an actor mid-performance. Without your reaction, the drama collapses. The Stoics were not emotionless. They were disciplined. Epictetus reminded us, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Listening is more than hearing words. It is watching motives, studying patterns, allowing time for truth to reveal itself. Silence gives you that vantage point. It allows you to see the intent behind the words, rather than being swept away by their sound. Consider how many mistakes in life come not from malice, but from haste. We explain too much to those who don't care. We defend ourselves to those who never planned to believe us. We spend energy proving what needs no proof. But silence frees you from that cycle. It does not mean you never speak. It means you choose when, where, and to whom your words are worthy. Some people don't want the truth. They want control. Silence denies them that power. The beauty of silence is that it is always within reach. You don't need special training. You don't need permission. You only need the discipline to hold it when your ego screams to speak. And in that pause, you reclaim sovereignty over yourself. So what is the lesson here? Silence is not nothing. It is a tool. Use it to separate impulse from intention, to protect your dignity from being dragged into someone else's chaos. Remember that many of the greatest battles are not fought aloud, but won quietly in the mind. The more you master your silence, the less you are manipulated by noise. Because freedom does not always roar. Sometimes it sits quietly, unshaken, a calm presence that nothing can move. And from here, let us turn to another Stoic secret, one that teaches us not just when to remain silent, but when to act with clarity and courage, even when guilt and obligation try to hold us hostage. 7. Observe without assumption. How many times have you misread someone's silence, convinced yourself they were angry, or built an entire story from a single glance? I have done it too, more often than I'd like to admit. and every time it led not to clarity, but to stress, distance, and regret. Assumptions are emotional traps. In a world that rewards speed over reflection, where social media fuels snap judgments and instant reactions, one of the rarest and most powerful skills is the ability to simply observe without rushing to interpret. That rarity is your shield, because manipulators thrive on your impatience. They want you to jump to conclusions, to assign motives, to respond emotionally before you have the full picture. Modern Stoicism reminds us that truth does not need to be rushed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone does wrong, the harm is to themselves." That line alone stops me in my tracks. It reminds me that not everything is about me, that a missed greeting, a distant look, or a moment of silence may have nothing to do with who I am. Yet, how often do we internalize it? How often do we let imagined offenses disturb our peace? When you observe rather than assume, you give truth the time to rise on its own. You create mental breathing room. You keep your emotional center intact. And in today's chaotic world, that calmness is one of the rarest forms of strength. I remember a co-worker who once ignored my morning greeting. Immediately my mind leapt into overdrive. Did I offend them? Were they upset with me? Had I done something wrong? But the reality was simple. They hadn't even heard me. They were preoccupied, lost in thought, carrying burdens that had nothing to do with me. My assumption could have created distance where compassion was needed. This is the danger. When we fill in the blanks too quickly, we begin acting on stories that aren't even real, and those stories shape how we treat others. Our minds hate uncertainty. We'd rather have a wrong answer than no answer at all. That is human. But manipulators exploit this need. They create scenarios that press your urgency, forcing you to guess, to fill in the silence with fear, and to react before you have clarity. That is why slowing down, observing, and refusing to assume is such a powerful act of resistance. When you withhold judgment, you break the script. You stop feeding the drama. You step outside their control. So the next time you feel the spark of assumption, pause. Ask yourself, what do I truly know, and what am I inventing? That pause is your stoic moment. It is your superpower. Clarity is not born in speculation. It is born in stillness. Modern Stoicism doesn't demand cold detachment. It teaches mastery of your reactions. And when you master them, you protect your peace, your clarity, and your energy. Think about how many arguments could have been avoided, how many moments of anxiety spared, if you had simply observed instead of assumed. What would your life look like if you no longer allowed imagined offenses to steer your choices? The Stoics remind us that strength is not always about force, it is about awareness. And when you live with awareness, you become untouchable. Not because you fight harder, but because you refuse to be drawn into battles that were never yours to begin with. And this brings us to the next principle, where we will see how discernment not only protects you from false assumptions, but also teaches you to recognize the true intent behind actions that seem harmless on the surface. 8. Reject empty approval. Have you ever caught yourself waiting for someone's approval before feeling at peace with your own choices? It might be a nod, a compliment, or even just the absence of criticism. There's nothing unnatural about wanting to be seen and respected. But the real danger lies in where you choose to seek that validation. Because manipulators, those who smile with one hand while concealing a knife in the other, can sense that hunger instantly. They notice when you're searching for reassurance, and they feed it in small doses, just enough to keep you tethered. What they give is never true recognition. It is a leash disguised as praise, lined with conditions. And the moment you stop dancing for them, their kindness disappears. Epictetus once warned, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." At first, those words sting, but behind them lies freedom. He was reminding us that integrity matters more than applause, that bending your values for the sake of approval will always cost more than it gives. I think of Michael, a man like many of us, honest, hard-working, eager to be appreciated. At his new job, he met Darren, a colleague who seemed supportive, attentive, even admiring. For a while, it felt like friendship. But slowly, Michael realized something was wrong. His private doubts and confessions began to surface in meetings, twisted and used against him, always to Darren's advantage. When Michael finally stopped depending on Darren's praise, the warmth evaporated. That is the test. If someone's respect vanishes when you no longer need their approval, it was never respect at all. It was control. Seneca captured this truth when he wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." The craving doesn't have to be for money, it can be for praise. And when you hunger for the wrong person's validation, you become poor in dignity, empty in spirit. You give them the power to shape your sense of worth, and in doing so, you surrender yourself piece by piece. But the Stoic does not reject feedback blindly. They test it, weigh it, and ask, has this person earned the right to influence me? Do they act with consistency, compassion, and truth? If the answer is no, then their words hold no weight. For the Stoic, being misjudged is a small price to pay for remaining true to oneself. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is to be misunderstood and to stand firm without explaining. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, reminded himself, "We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." That contradiction is where manipulators thrive. They strike where your craving for approval outweighs your own judgment. But once you see it, you can break free. So ask yourself this: would I still make this choice if no one ever praised me for it? If your answer is yes, then you're standing on solid ground. That is Stoicism in motion, living from the inside out. And when you live this way, no praise can corrupt you, and no criticism can shake you. You become whole, untethered and free, no longer waiting to be defined by anyone else's voice, but burning quietly with the strength of your own. Let people misjudge you. Let them whisper and misunderstand. You are not a reflection waiting for others to define your worth. You are the flame, steady and unwavering, and your light comes from within. The deepest Stoic secret is this: true strength does not perform for attention, nor does it bend for approval. It burns quietly, guided by conviction. When you live from that place, no praise can corrupt you, and no criticism can unsettle you. These 8 principles are more than ideas. They are shields, guarding your inner freedom. Carry them with you and let them remind you that mastery of self is the greatest defense against manipulation. If this message resonates, subscribe and join the journey. Share your voice in the comments with just 2 words: calm mind. Stay strong, stay clear, and be ready as we move from defense to strategy in the next chapter.